Larry, it's been something of a tumultuous week in the equity markets in particular, as the equity markets come to grips with really the increase in coronavirus cases in places like Florida and Texas and California and Arizona. I have to say, to give you your due, for at least a month or so, you've been warning if we come back too fast and really haven't put a stake in the heart of this virus, we got problems. It turns out you may be right.
I think so, David. We were operating with a contagion factor nationwide of 0.8. If we don't do anything, that contagion factor is 2.5. So it means you can't move a very large fraction of the way back to normal without getting into trouble. And we've moved maybe a third of the way back to normal, and that's too much. And we're now in trouble in a set of places, and markets are waking up to that. I don't think the biggest problem is the trouble we're in right now. I think Texas and Florida will be forced to backtrack and move towards closing down. I think we will close down more in a certain number of places. I think the discouraging thing, which I think the market is starting to come to grips with, but still hasn't fully come to grips with, is that until we have a new vaccine, or we have a much better therapy, David, we're now looking at the new normal. We're not going to have probably catastrophic episodes, or at least not very many, like what happened in New York, because we'll get on top of them a little faster. But we're not trying to reduce this virus to a negligible level. And so we're going to live with a chronic ongoing problem, a chronic ongoing cause of death. I don't know whether it'll be 500 people dying a day or 1,000 people dying a day. I guess somewhere in between. But that's going to be the new reality until we have a vaccine. And while that reality is happening, we're not going to be able to have a lot of the things that we're used to. If you look in detail at the plans for the places that are coming back, it's not all the way back in terms of what's going to happen in a junior high school classroom, what's going to happen on a college campus, what the density is going to be in a restaurant or a bar. And what we're seeing is that we got to it too quickly. So I think we're going to be living with what I've called very mediocre whack-a-mole as our strategy for well over a year. And I don't think it's going to be great. I'm not sure it's going to be a W with a major double dip, but it's sure not going to be continued growth at the rate we've seen.
So, Larry, at the very end of this week, we heard from the Vice President, Mike Pence, who came out with his task force. And what he said is these are isolated outbreaks. It's county by county, even community by community. And the only real response is to listen to your local authorities. A different approach than was taken, for example, in Europe. Where is he wrong? It's whack-a-mole, but he says we can contain this in isolated instances.
Well, first, he's wrong to say that it's isolated instances. It's an odd thing to say since it's most of his electoral coalition, led by Texas and Florida, that he's calling isolated. It's the first time I've heard a Republican describe them as just a few stray parts of America. Second, I guess everybody's got their own idea of isolated. I don't think of a new killing factor that kills more Americans in a year by far than murder or suicide or opioids all put together. I don't call that something that's like a minor factor in terms of global health. Third, I don't think of something that enters into every family in America's life planning when they think about whether they're going to go out to the store as being isolated or minor. I don't think of the United States doing far worse than countries in Africa, far worse than most countries in America, in Europe, in protecting its citizens. The essence of, after all, national security. I don't think of that as being an isolated and small thing. And the reason we formed the United States 244 years ago was because we recognized that we were stronger as a union. So when we have a contagious disease that doesn't know from a state border or a county seat, I can't imagine why, when it came to issues like pulling together for vaccines, or when it comes to issues like regulating what's a safe health practice when people can just drive across a state border with complete impunity, I can't imagine what could be causing these people to think that this is something that's best dealt with in 50 state units or 1,000 local government units. It seems to me to be a contradiction of the very idea of the United States to treat a problem that's fundamentally the most fundamental national security problem in terms of the lives and livelihoods of Americans that we've had in the last 60 years. To treat that as local, I think it's madness.
We have, of course, the epidemiological problem to deal with. We also have an economy that really is struggling quite a bit. Overall this week, what message did the market send to, for example, the Federal Reserve about how long they're going to have to keep going with their support, given where we're headed?
It can't be any encouraging message, David. But look, I've also been saying this from the beginning. If people think they're going to get a disease that might kill them or might make them contagious in a way that kills their mother, they are not going to go shopping and buy a new car or a new washing machine, whatever the interest rate is. You cannot push on a string. And so, yes, the Fed can play some defense against cascading bankruptcy. Yes, we can give for a time transfer payments that will maintain the income of people. Yes, there's some opportunities we should take advantage of in this moment of low interest rates to invest in our country's future. But fundamentally, we have to address the pandemic if our economy is going to move forward. And the Fed can't know anything about where it's going to be a year and a half from now without knowing where the virus is going to be. And I think increasingly they should adjust their communication strategy to use virus time rather than calendar time. Make statements like, we're going to keep interest rates at zero until a year after the virus is fully under control. That's the kind of announcement I think they should be thinking in terms of.
Which finally leads us to the question, have the markets internalized just how long this may take?
I think there's more risk of markets being too optimistic at this point than there is of markets being too pessimistic. And I don't think the fundamentals of the economy are that terribly good right now. I think they're as bad as they've been probably in my professional lifetime. I think what is true is that what markets price is what might be called the S&P economy or the corporate economy. And that's a very different thing than the real economy. You know, Apple accounts for 5% of the market value of the U.S. stock market. It accounts for 0.05% of employment in the United States. And so I think we need policies that, we can't have the financial system collapse, but the priority's got to be Main Street at this point.